and to see how we can actually work around the post-COVID era and how to assist regional firms to access the US market. So briefly, I'll just share with you what our program looks like this afternoon. And after that, I'll also just give a brief outline in terms of our house rules so that we can proceed with this very informative session. So right now, I'm doing the introductions, which is quite fun. And then our DCOP, George Makore, whom I'm going to introduce just now, will do the opening remarks. Lene, our partner from the US, CEO of Bhavana World Projects, will take us through the post-COVID-19 market trends and the move to virtual, socially responsible supply chains. For 15 minutes between 2:30 and 3:15, we have our special guest, Jessica Rabi, who's going to be talking about US apparel and accessories. And she's giving us a few illustrative talking points. And then for 15 minutes between 2:45 and 3 o'clock, we'll have a B2B platform for global artisan products. And this will be headed by our colleague, our guest, Edwin Alexander. After that, we'll have 15 minutes of question and answer. Our experts will be answering all our questions. They ask questions that you received from our participants in advance, and also have a chat box where you're actually welcome to actually place your questions so that we can go through them. Whichever questions we don't go through, we'll actually be able to do that after the webinar and share them with all the participants. Between 3:15 and 3:25, we'll have a wrap-up with Bhavana leading that, and our two expert buyers also talking to that. Then we'll have a closing remarks by myself after the webinar. So just a few house rules so that we have a bit of, we maximize the 1 hour, 30 minutes. If you're not speaking, please, if you don't mind, we can go off video so that we don't have problems with bandwidth. And please try by all means to remain muted so that we do not disturb the flow of our presentations. And again, if there's questions, we actually urge you to put them on the chat box. We'll go through them, or we'll try by all means to go through them with the limited time we have. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce the Deputy Chief of Party, Mr. George Makore. So George Makore is the Deputy Chief of Party of our USID Trade Hub. And just a brief outline about George. He's a development professional with over 25 years experience, mainly in the SADC region, and has been working on programs aimed at enhancing regional integration and strengthening the Southern Africa region's competitiveness and the roles of focusing on trade, investment policy, and communications. He has successfully facilitated development of African Growth and Opportunity Act, utilization strategies for a few countries, Botswana, Lesotho, Malawi, and Zambia. And those strategies actually support trade and investment between countries and the US. Currently, as I've mentioned, he is the Deputy Chief of Party at the USI Trade Hub, and he has past work experiences including Director for AGOA and Export Competitiveness for the USI Trade Hub, Director of Enabling Environment for the USAID Southern Africa Trade Hub. And George has an MBA in Corporate Strategy, a Master's in Law, in Business Law, and Master's in Project Management, and a Bachelor of Technology in Marketing. Over to you, George. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sim. That's the longest introduction I've ever heard you say about me. But thanks all the same. Quite flattering introduction there. Colleagues, good afternoon, and welcome to yet another of our webinars to try and get us to continue to share knowledge, exchange views, and have a cross-pollination of ideas. My role today is just to, again, for those that have attended the webinars before that we organize, to just reiterate who we are. We see that as an important activity or part of these webinars so that we are clear on how we can, you are clear on how we can actually be of help to you in order for you to achieve your objectives. So the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub, which is USAID Trade Hub in short, is a USAID funded project, which is a 6-year project in its 5th year of the 6 years. We have been in existence since October 2016. And our role really is to work across the region, in this case, 9 countries, to help increase sustainable economic growth and global export competitiveness, as well as trade in those countries in the region that we work in, Southern Africa. And in doing that, how do we actually do that? We have 3 main objectives, which are actually our mandate as a project. The first objective is to link up buyers from South Africa with potential suppliers from the 8 countries that we work in. And these countries is outlined there in the picture there. And they are Angola, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Namibia, Mozambique, Malawi, and Zambia. So we identify potential suppliers of products that are in South Africa, and we link up the suppliers with the buyers so that there is trade between those countries and South Africa. Within that activity, we also facilitate the trade by providing the aspects that are required for those companies to be able to navigate what would be challenges in getting their products into South Africa. One such example is where we assist companies with aspects such as certification, required certification, understanding the rules and trade regulations between South Africa and those countries. Then linked to that, we also work with providers or suppliers of products in the 9 countries that I mentioned, and in this case, including South Africa, to export products to the US under the African Growth and Opportunity Act. This is to a great extent the reason why we are here today, working with such entities like Bhavana. We get them to help us understand the market that we want to export to, which is the US market, and as well as help us identify potential buyers in the US so that there is business between our region and the US. And finally, the third objective is also linked to 2 objectives that I mentioned. And this is really looking at overcoming some of the challenges that are highlighted by the potential exporters. And this is to do with the need for capital and technology to help them, the exporters or producers, to be able to meet their market demands. And the aspect of capital, we're looking here at linking potential investors from South Africa who would be looking at expanding their footprint into the region by investing in the companies that will be working with in the region. And then those investors can then be able to work closely with the would-be investees, thereby solving 2 issues. One, that of lack of capital or technology, as well as the issue of increasing the exports from those countries either into South Africa or into the US under AGOA. Those are the activities that we carry out as the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. The rest of it, of course, linked to this webinar today, you will get to hear it from the panel that we have that is going to take us through the discussion we have actually put together for you. With those words, I would like to wish everyone productive discussions and hope that you find this webinar worth your while. And at this point, I would like to hand you over back to Sim. Over to you, Sim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George, for the introduction. That is very, very useful. So without taking too much time, I would like to introduce you to our first speaker, Linnae Ferretti, who is actually not a stranger to this region. Okay. So Linnae is the CEO of Bhavana World Projects, and this is an organization that's got a partnership with the USI Trade Hub based in the US. She has more than 20 years of experience in international business development, product design, fashion, and is experienced in fair trade standards and certification. She served as CEO and executive director of 10,000 Villages, a very, very popular organization in East Africa, and has been working for more than 120, which was working with more than 120 SMEs, rather, for lack of a better word, in 35 countries, using trade as a solution for poverty alleviation. From 2015 to 2018, Linnae served as the Trade Advisory Committee for Africa for the Office of the President of the United States. And she's here with us today, not for the first time, but give us a few snippets in terms of how we can access the US market. Over to you, Linnae.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm looking forward to sharing some insights with you about the US market post-COVID, and also having you meet two of our guest presenters, Jess Ramsey and Hedvig Alexander, to talk more about their specific area of sourcing. And so with that, welcome, and let's begin. So what we're going to speak about today is exporting primarily to the US market fashion accessories and home decor products from the Southern Africa region. Next slide. Next, thank you. So let me just tell you a little bit more about Bhavana. We are a social enterprise, and we work to promote the socioeconomic advancement, primarily of women, not excluding men, through international trade in the fashion, textiles, accessory, and home decor markets. We have been in business for about 10 years, which I find hard to believe. And we've delivered services on 5 continents to more than 50,000 entrepreneurs, generating revenue of about $50 million. One of our other programs is an economic empowerment program that is a market-based skills training program, incubator accelerator model that helps to increase access to export markets through education. And we've done that for more than 1,000 women organizations in 20 countries. So that's a little bit of our background. We have worked extensively in Africa. We say our heart is in Africa. And so it's very exciting to be working with the Southern Africa Hub to bring our expertise to this part of the world. So let's talk about COVID and some of the market changes that have happened since COVID. I think the first thing we could say is what has changed. Maybe the easier thing to say is what hasn't changed. I think our lives have changed significantly, and we're still trying to learn what's going to happen as we come out of this pandemic, both personally and professionally and within industry. What we do see is some trends in the US market and internationally that came out of necessity during the time of COVID, but now are also using technology in new ways to link people to do business in a different way. So some of the things I'm going to talk about is this move to virtual sourcing and the eruption really of B2B platforms to link businesses to businesses through technology. And Hedvig Alexander, our second speaker, is going to speak about that in detail. Her business, Powered for People, is all about that. This started with a trend with an organization called Fair.com. If you're familiar with them, if you're not, I would advise you to look them up. They started a US-based only international B2B wholesale platform. And through COVID, it exploded. And so now there are new, more niche market opportunities coming for this technology where buyers and sellers can link in a virtual format. And so that's very exciting. Also, trade shows, of course, have had to become virtual. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in detail. And how is preparing for a trade show that's a virtual trade show different than an in-person trade show? There is a growing demand for socially responsible sourcing and production. This has been a swell. We've seen this happening in the market, but COVID has made it clear that consumers are really beginning to demand this more. And so companies are needing to look at their supply chains differently and be sure that sustainable sourcing is part of their communication and their practices in their business. Companies are becoming aware of their supply chain vulnerabilities. Again, we knew this before COVID. Many businesses knew that they were oversaturated in Asian markets, but for doing business there a very long time, it's hard. It's difficult to change, but COVID has forced companies to realize that that change is necessary. And so that is opening up other market opportunities. Oh, and that's fair with an E, by the way. But thank you for posting that. FAIRE, fair.com. Thank you. And then the consumer demand, which drives everything, really. The consumer is driving this need for transparency and social consciousness and environmental responsibility. So let's go into this a little bit in more detail, and I'll give you some more examples of how these market trends are playing out. Next slide. Thank you. So the move to virtual sourcing, I think the real game changer is wholesale business platforms, B2B. So B2C is still happening. Of course, people are consuming more B2C than ever. But B2B is a new niche for reaching wholesale markets internationally through the use of technology. It's a very big opportunity. There are platforms that are positioned specifically for smaller size businesses, handmade, handcrafted, sustainable materials. We'll talk about that more later in the presentation. But this is a great opportunity, I believe. And for me, I think one of the most exciting opportunities that has come out of COVID. With virtual trade shows, they are, I don't know if any of you have participated in any of them. We have worked on a few, and I know Jess has worked on a few as well. They're much more price competitive than getting on a plane and going to a trade show, but they're different as far as how you need to prepare for them. And so what I would say is, what has to happen for a virtual trade show is you need to really set up a virtual environment that communicates your brand and your product. So good photography is extremely important. A well-crafted story and a brand point of view. So taking a position and communicating that position, not communicating everything that you do, but what you do best so that you can stand out in the market. Following up consistently over a longer period of time. The trade shows can last up to a month. So you have to have the capacity to keep communicating with buyers over that period of time, and then to follow up with pertinent information like catalogs that match the presentation that's on the website. Excelevent.com has a great preparing for virtual trade shows handbook, best practices. So if you're planning to do a virtual trade show or test that, they may be a good opportunity for you to look for some information. So next slide. So now we talked about the awareness of supply chain vulnerabilities. And so diversification, brands are looking for ways to diversify out of China. Part of what that entails is having traceability, and buyers need traceability on their own, for their own supply chains. Because this socially responsible demand by the consumer is increasing. And so what does that mean to you? What it means is you have to be prepared when you're engaging in buyers to be able to explain to buyers your supply chain and your inputs for supply chain and your company's downstream supply chain management. Source of material, source of labor, source of packaging, All of these parts are very important and many times are required before a company will even engage in a price conversation. So to understand that this is becoming more and more important, and as companies diversify, part of the diversification, this is part of the reason why they're diversifying. Next slide. And then again, just the demand for socially conscious sourcing. And what does that entail? So I always say you can go into socially conscious sourcing from many doors. And so people sometimes choose a particular area that they want to focus on when they talk about their socially conscious sourcing. It may be the support of sustainable employment for small businesses. It may be providing meaningful community inclusion for small businesses. It may be the preservation of cultural heritage within a particular product or tradition. It could be the social innovation of a project that someone is doing that's bringing social, environmental, and economic components together. Environmental stability is incredibly important, and we've talked about that. Fair trade is a smaller niche inside of socially conscious sourcing. So if you practice fair trade specifically, then fair trade certifications or fair trade membership of organizations is important. And then use of technology, really maximizing technology to tell your story and to grow because the consumer needs to know the background of the product. And so technology is our best way to be able to provide that. Thank you. So let's look at design trends. Those are market trends. Let's look at now design trends. And this is from Fashion Snoops, who's a trend organization out of New York. And this slide puts the customer, we'll get to that question. That's a good question. This slide represents the customer in the center, customer-centric center of the market. And the customer requiring reciprocity amongst the products and the services that they need. What does that mean? I think COVID has created this understanding of the reciprocity we all have with each other. It happened. It was true before, but I think we've realized it now more. And so, our impact on the environment, our impact on each other, our choices are creating our world. And so those choices matter. And so consumers are looking for reciprocity with nature and not necessarily harming nature in the process of purchasing. They're looking for reciprocity in having with others, and so in their relationships with others. And so this all informs how they want to purchase and what they want to support as far as brands are concerned when they're making their buying decisions. Next slide. And so this now moves into trend as well. We see the social and environmental theme continue with nature as a theme for print. And so people wanting to be outdoors, connecting with the outdoors, even urban outdoors. It's not just a traditional idea of being outdoors, but in city settings, nature is there as well. And then also materials that respect the environment, whether they're natural, whether they're local, or also whether they're a substitute material for something that may be harmful to the environment. Like leather, vegan leather is becoming very popular just because of tanning issues with leather. Also fur with microfibers, although that process can be a little bit environmentally unstable. Plant-dyed or plant-based dyes. This whole, the importance of social and economic or social and environmental theme is not just a market trend for how we purchase, but it's also inspiring us to design. And that's quite new, actually. I mean, they've been coming together for many years, but this has really brought it to the point where what we consume is the trend, and how we consume is the trend going forward. And that I think is really exciting, and really exciting for entrepreneurs in Southern Africa. Next slide. And so I'll go through these quickly. These are some examples of Southern African brands that do have presence in the US market. This is Asha 11. And I'm just showing you very briefly some key information that you need to have to present to the US market. One, clear, beautiful photography. You can see that this, this is done very simply, but very effectively with clean white background, wonderful silhouettes, great color, very easy to read the garments on the body. Also, it's important to highlight the materials that you use, particularly if any of them are eco-friendly, your minimum, so your MOQs, manufacturers, minimum order quantity, and your lead times. And so lead times are tricky. You have to know, the size of the order is different. If the size of the order, depending on the size of the order, I should say, depends on the lead time, but it's something that buyers need to know. And then anything within your supply chain that represents social or environmental sustainability. So where you're sourcing your raw materials, if you're using upcycled or recycled materials as they are, if you have standards that you're using, or that you're complying to, all that information is sales and marketing information now in this new age. Next slide. This is Matuna. They do silk scarves. And I think that this is a beautiful example of how you can very simply take a photograph of a textile and show the textile really clearly and beautifully and very simply. So I wanted to share this with you. Again, you see similar materials, the lead times, and in this case, their social responsibility is a program that links back to safe houses for women and children who are experiencing gender-based violence. So we can go to the next slide. Coco is from Eswatini, and again, just lovely, simple images on the body for size is very important. The picture in the upper right is actually photoshopped on top of the flowers, so you don't even have to have it in the environment. You can create the environment with technology, and just so a way to show natural materials, and then of course speak about the sustainability of these materials that are being used, which are local and renewable. Next slide. And then Matizio, who is doing footwear with sustainable leather. They are a fair trade company and have a variety of ways to package sustainability in their use of materials. Even their soles are using upcycled material as well. So these are all the important aspects to share about your business, why you're unique, and why you fit this particular trend that's happening in the market, while you're the solution to some of the things that the trend is leaning towards. Next slide. So I wouldn't be complete if I didn't speak a little bit about AGOA. And George and Sim talked about this earlier. Please use the Trade Hub as a resource for AGOA and AGOA knowledge to sell to the United States. What I will tell you is that buyers are still not as aware of as AGOA as you may think they are. And so partly I think it's all of our jobs to make sure that buyers understand the advantages of AGOA. So there are the advantages of duty-free. They are the advantages of a win-win scenario for both the US buyer and the African supplier. But it's something that you should understand about how your products benefit from AGOA, so you can speak to that as a way of marketing your product. Next slide. And then when we talk about the advantages in sourcing in Southern Africa, we certainly talk about the duty-free categories in apparel and at home products. We talk about the diversification and expansion into the fastest growing market in the world. We talk about social responsibility supply chains and supporting Black and women-owned businesses as a very important aspect of why sourcing in South Africa is a right fit for the market today. That the capacity is vetted, particularly through the hub and the work that we're doing. We're asking questions and helping to harvest information for buyers so that we can make a match. There's the opportunity to work with small, bespoke small batch producers, and branded collaborations with exceptional entrepreneurs and designers. I think that's a very exciting area, and I think the market in the US side is starting to understand the power that's there as well. Next slide. This is just a final slide about us, to say that we believe in all the brands and designers that we work with across the continent. They are our source of inspiration. It's our work and our honor to try to make sustainable matches. It doesn't happen quickly. I think that's one of the difficult things in being an entrepreneur. You do need things to happen quickly, but international sales take a little bit longer. And so don't be discouraged as information goes out and things come back, but they're not quite ready to sample, or they're making decisions. Expanding into a new market does take time, but Africa is positioned for this market trend in a very special way. And so our job is to promote that, to put people and planet first. And that's why we love what we do. So with that, I'm going to continue. We're going to continue the conversation with an expert, actually in sourcing, and an expert in Africa sourcing, Jess Ramsey, who's the founder of Mercantilla. And Jess is the founder and boots on the ground for the organization. With more than a decade of experience, she and her teams collaborate with some of the most exciting and adventurous global fashion brands working in Africa. Founded in 2014, Mercantilla provides a hands-on approach to helping brands source and develop healthy and ethical partnerships with the continent's most remote and marginalized communities. So Jess, it is a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're also good friends, so I always enjoy spending time with you. Jess, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do with your clients in Mercantilla and the differences that you see specifically in the marketplace because of COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background on me personally and how I entered into this marketplace. My background is in fashion design. My degree is in design from FIT in New York. And right before graduating from FIT, I spent 6 months in Ghana teaching sewing and pattern making on a Liberian refugee camp there. And that was really my first introduction into how the manufacturing industry is such a powerful tool for development, because this was done in such a small micro way, but, it was a school of 30 women with sewing machines that didn't require electricity. And in 3 months, they had enough of a skill set to cut, to sew, to measure, and to start their own small businesses and dress shops. And I found it really inspiring and really powerful because I was coming from New York City and big industry with big players and just seeing it as, this kind of monster manufacturing hub. And to see in such a small way how it can be so transformative really set me on my course professionally. So when I graduated, I began working for a brand called Eden, which was a pioneer in the American fashion market in manufacturing in Africa. If you're not familiar with it, it was started by Bono and his wife, Allie Houston, and then later took up a partnership with LVMH. And really we were able to accelerate what the brand was able to do in Africa and also really see and explore all the possibilities across the continent. So for nearly 7 years, I worked for them doing product development and production management, specifically within Africa, and fell in love with it. We worked all over. We worked in Morocco, we worked in Kenya and Madagascar and Tanzania. So I really got to see the diversity of what the continent has to offer and where there really is specialized opportunity in different regions. Then with that, I decided to move to Nairobi, and I started a consulting business so I could take what I had learned from working at Eden and working across Africa, and help other brands and help other manufacturers find those same connections. So what we really do is we work with largely American brands. It's also expanding into Europe quite quickly because the interest in Africa is really becoming global. But we're with the client and also the vendors from beginning to end. There's still a big learning curve with how to work in Africa, and there's a big learning curve for how can African companies work with American brands, because how the two work is very different and the two needs are very different. And so we partner with both sides and are that bridge that's with everybody from the beginning to the end. And that starts with sourcing and, finding interesting and unique products that give American brands something unique to offer their clientele. It then goes into vetting and making sure that everybody is who they say they are, that if a manufacturer is saying they're compliant, we go through the auditing process, we look at records, we look at how to onboard them, and we make sure that this is going to be a safe partnership for both sides, because it requires time and financial commitment on everybody's part to start a new relationship. And that's why, you find things are going slow, because people really have to invest in working someplace new and in trying something new. And, everybody's kind of stepping out on a limb. And so we do our best to make sure everybody's as safeguarded as possible. And then once it actually goes past the kind of initial get to know you phase, we're really there to be hands-on in product development and production management, because at the end of it, you can have a beautiful product, you can have a unique story, you can have something that is one of a kind. But if the quality doesn't meet the end consumer's expectation, if it doesn't meet their own personal expectation, you're going to run into a problem. And if it doesn't meet your customer's expectation, you're also going to run into a problem. And so basically the core of our work and the bread and butter of our work is really being hands-on in the product development and the production management phase to make sure both sides are understanding the challenges that are going on, to make sure that the vendors are understanding the quality requirements and expectations of them, and then making sure that the communication and the lead times and everything are still falling in line, because you have to be able to deliver, and it has to be the product that people expect. It's the biggest kind of kink in the chain when we're first starting with people, is everybody's so excited, and we're so excited that we're doing something new and something beautiful, and we feel like we're breaking ground, but it has to meet the end consumer's requirements. And that's where I think there's starting to be more of an understanding, just with, you see a lot of it with younger generations and social media. There's a lot more connection. But for quite a while, Africa was an unknown, and it was hard to research, and it was hard to really understand what was going on both sides. And so that's been the biggest part of our work so far. And that leads into basically how that's now changed with COVID. And a lot of what I'm, had planned to say is exactly what Lene had said, but it's worth reiterating. This last year has changed everybody's sourcing structure. We realized that everything we thought was sustainable and ethical and above board, we run into problems like, why can't we survive 1 week if we were doing this right all along? And so the scrutiny of the supply chain has increased tenfold. You can't say any longer, yeah, we're ethical, yeah, we're fair. You have to be able to prove it. And that's to everybody's benefit, because we all realized just how vulnerable we were. It's like, and particularly the manufacturing industry, we're the last people in the chain holding the stick of dynamite last April. The manufacturing industry was the one that had the orders canceled on them, shipments were abandoned, bills left unpaid. And I think that uprooted everybody's thinking and like, how are we doing this and why are we doing this? So it's been a lot of really good conversations over the last year. And from a very practical point of view, the biggest change I've seen is that the manufacturers now have more power, and specifically with payment terms. And this is a nitty-gritty detail, but I think it's the biggest one that's changed people's stability. Is for the longest time, the consumer had all of the power in the order, in dictating lead times, in dictating payment terms, in dictating everything that we needed to do to get their business. And when, last April happened and the whole world shut down, we realized like, that's not fair. And you see it from the top. I mean, we see it with the brands that we work with. The person that had the ultimate power to us were the wholesale retailers. And if they wanted to change terms, if they wanted to return things, if they wanted to not accept an order, then the brand was stuck. And then we saw it trickle down. So now the brand is stuck. Now it goes down to, well, we can't accept this delivery. Well, we have to extend payment terms to 120 days. And we're sorry, we just can't take it. And so I see a big shift in that whole model, and everybody is coming to terms with their responsibility more. And so what I've been telling and working with a lot of people on over the past 6 months is, you stand your ground with what you need, and you have to. Like, people think you're being tough, people think you're being unfair, but people, if you're coming into this space, especially when we're talking about, most people that we work with come to Africa either from a mission perspective, from wanting to source sustainably, wanting to find new and authentic kind of crafts that have cultural relevance, then most of these people are open to partnership. They just have a lack of knowledge in what's required. And so we've had their tough conversations because people are unhappy when you raise prices. People are unhappy when you say, sorry, we have to have a deposit and we have to have, payment prior to shipment. But I think these are the shifts that are really giving everybody a stronger footing to actually be sustainable. It's like when you're talking about, everybody has their own definition of what sustainable is, but at the core, it's like, does this model work where everybody can make it? And so that's a lot of the practical part of the past year that we've been working to change. It's been nice because I've also seen clients going back to people leaving Asia and having problems with manufacturers in China, especially for larger businesses that now have issues with how traceable their cotton is within China. Brands are really open to new opportunities. Before, everybody kind of had their model and it was really hard to break in and give them something new. You really had to be compelling and forceful, and it had to just make perfect sense. They wanted it to be a no-brainer. And I've seen a lot now that brands are like, well, hey, like, we didn't know half of what we thought we did before. So it's much easier to have conversations and explore. But going back to kind of what Lene said, you got to have your ducks in a row with the information that they're going to need. And that is clarity of supply chain and being able to prove the traceability aspects of it. Brands are really under scrutiny if they're saying they're ethical. The end consumer is more educated than ever. And so being able to show exactly who you are and why you are that way, being able to have a clear understanding of your minimums and lead times and how your structure works. In the past, we've worked with a lot of smaller artisan groups, and the biggest part of what we have to do is helping them understand how their business works. We work with, groups that do handmade jewelry and things like that, and they have no idea how many pieces they make in a month. They have no idea what it actually costs. They've given it their best estimate and it works out, and sometimes it really doesn't, and they don't understand why they make no money at the end of the day. So being able to confidently explain your business, how it works, and how the customer can work within it is key. As soon as the customer starts to feel that there's vagueness or anything in that model, then they get weary. And it's no for other reasons, like, well, is this going to be successful? It's like, they don't know if it all comes down to, oh, it depends on the design, or, oh, it depends on this. It just starts to put a seed of doubt into a client's mind. So if you're able to speak really confidently on how you work, most people want to come to you and be like, okay, we'll do it this way. They don't want to be the one figuring out how to work with you and how we fit into your business. And then also being really clear on pricing, because once you quote, once that price goes out, it's pretty much set in stone. And so we've had kind of just issues where if that's not right, then everybody kind of runs into a problem. And so your production strategy, your minimums, your lead times, and your traceability needs to be solid. And then it becomes a really clear win from just a practical point of view. And then you can start going into what makes you unique, what are the design elements, and you get into the fun part of creating something beautiful with somebody new. And that kind of goes into, especially people are seeking to work with Africa just because there's so much beautiful design heritage that is unique and it offers something new to a US client base. And so the storytelling elements, the educational part of it as to who these, what these heritages are, what are these cultural trends, what does this mean to the various communities that we're taking these designs from. I think that education element is also a really powerful tool to explain to these customers, because they're coming from, the US, and unless they happen to have personally educated themselves into all of these various cultures and all these countries across Africa, Africa is basically just seen as, one big dot on the map to most Americans, and they see prints and they see things that they recognize as African, but they don't understand how the minutia of where all of these points of reference come from. And I think people are really seeking that. Like I see on, social media, if people are posting, if brands are posting, a beautiful print that they have done in West Africa, there's 3 or 4 comments that are like, hey, what tribe is this from? Do you know what ceremony is this from? Do you know what the purpose of this is? There's a real desire for education, and there's also a level of accountability that is now required of brands. And I think the truth of that is that education is going to have to come from the manufacturers and the artisan groups and the various people that these people are seeking to work with in Africa. And if you're able to do that, and it's able to be, if your aesthetic is clear, like going back to like what Lene said about photography, if everything about who you are is clear and you're able to give that story to these companies, then it's a win. It makes all of the sense in the world to them. They have the trust in you. They see your unique position in all of this, and they know that they're getting something unique and special from what you're doing. And that's really been the biggest, the longest conversations, the most repetitive conversations we've had over this last year are over all of those details. It's how do we get past these hurdles? It's how are we all protected, and what are we adding to this situation that's good?
Jess, that's fantastic advice from boots on the ground. And actually, how do we make these relationships happen? I really liked how everything you were saying too, as far as the producer having more power than before because of what happened with COVID, I think is really empowering to share with a group of entrepreneurs that, there's always that hesitation with the buyer, but the buyer does need to be led and wants to be led. And it might not always be a comfortable conversation, but it's the right conversation to build a relationship. So
it is. Yeah, and it has to happen at the beginning. I think people flip the process of that. They want it to be fun and lighthearted, and hey, we'll just see where this goes, and we want you to be excited. And so they get through all of the fun design, the strike-offs, the sketches, the first drafts, the beadwork, and everyone's like, this is beautiful. And then you get to, well, how do we actually execute it? And you've now priced yourself into something the customer can't afford, or the lead time is going to be so much longer because of the way they've developed it. And so it needs to, unfortunately, I think people are hesitant to do it because they think clients are going to be scared away. And I don't think that's the case. But the specifics and the logistics and how it actually works has to be where it begins for it to actually follow through the way everybody needs it to.
Great. Jess, thank you so much. We'll come back to you with questions about your work. I really appreciate you joining us and sharing your knowledge with us. I'm going to introduce our next guest presenter, Hedvig Alexander. Hedvig is the Chief Commercial Officer at Powered by People, and which is the technology platform building digital tools, financial solutions, and a marketplace to connect producers and buyers in the creative manufacturing and handmade sector. Prior to this, she is the founder of Fair and Wide Collective, an online platform with a network of 5,000 suppliers, 400 retailers in 18 countries. She led building markets, adding 1.6% to Afghan's GDP in 2006, and was the general manager of Turquoise Mountain in Afghanistan. She's also the founder of the PIN Project for Refugees. Hedvig is a Danish Army captain and a Yale graduate. Hedvig, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you here. I am so excited by Powered by People. I can barely contain myself about it. Hedvig knows this. Hedvig, would you be willing to share a little bit about your experience and your background and the work that you're doing with Power of People and how specifically technology as a driver for market access for small entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. So nice to meet you all, and delighted to have this opportunity to speak directly to so many businesses in the southern part of Africa. And I mean, both Lene and Jess really lined this up perfectly for me, because I absolutely agree with everything, particularly what Jess was saying in the end, where I think there's no doubt that what you have to offer as creative manufacturing businesses, people want, but there is still too much friction in the buying process for the mainstream buyer. And so what Powered by People is ultimately trying to do is to remove some of that friction. Obviously, our overall goal is we want the creative manufacturing and handmade industry to be successful. We think, as both Lene and Jess was saying, is that this is a unique moment in time, and I think COVID has very much been part of positioning this, first very hard, but now there's this opportunity, because I think, as some of you may agree, that it's not so long ago where people would say, oh, well, handmade businesses, they can't really scale, and I can't really run my production through that because I need to scale. And I think now retail has been changing. People don't want to buy the same thing. Everybody wants something different. When I grew up in the 80s and 90s, everybody wanted the same. They don't want the same anymore. And what we constantly hear from buyers, small and big, is that they don't want to buy as deep into a small selection of product categories. They want to buy wide. And that means they'll buy maybe not as deep, but they'll buy wider because that helps them merchandise, tell more stories, and give people more diverse opportunity to buy, authentic products. And so I think that's a unique opportunity for the handmade sector. The thing that we thought was holding us back is no longer a problem. So how can we position ourselves to capture a much bigger part of the fashion accessories and jewelry market? I think that's really where the opportunity is. And even if you catch a couple of percent more of that, that's hundreds of millions of dollars in buying power. So it's definitely a worthwhile proposition. And so I think it also goes hand in hand with, after COVID, I know many of the producers and brands we knew, lost a lot of wholesale contracts, and so have been trying to become more self-reliant and go more direct to consumer. We are a wholesale platform, but we still very much support our partners and vendors also having a direct to consumer platform and help them support that. So I think what we as a technology platform are trying to do is basically three things in one. Is we are trying to create a marketplace, a business-to-business marketplace where buyers can discover as many handmade makers as at all possible, but on an enterprise level. But to support that connection and that introduction and making that business process much easier, we have added a financing solution so that both you can get paid early, but buyers can still have flexible payments. A lot of research shows that if buyers can get net 30 or net 60 terms, that they buy much more and much more frequently. And so I think we really, instead of saying, people should really pay early, which of course from an moral standpoint, we would all agree, but we also understand how many buyers run their cash flow. So how can we really bridge this gap and make sure that this doesn't become an obstacle for buyers buying from handmade vendors? So we've created a solution. We've also created a software, which it's now being used mostly in India for slightly bigger businesses, but we are building it out for smaller enterprises that can help you manage your production, your vendors, your suppliers, your your production and your buyers. And I think we talked a little bit, I think Jess came a little bit in on transparency. And I think it's really important, transparency. But it's something that people talk about all the time. But I don't think a lot of people necessarily have great solutions for how you really serve that up to people. And I think, you know, what is it that we really want to know about transparency? I mean, we want to know who's making the product. We want to make sure there's no child labor. We want to make sure people are paid a fair wage. You know, these are that they have, you know, work circumstances are safe, and these are sort of the basic things. Then there's lots of other things. You know, you want people to have benefits and things that we maybe can't enforce, and they may not be deal breakers, but it's things that I think honestly buyers increasingly want to see happen. And so what our system can is, because it's, you know, you can manage your production and, you know, pay your people and your suppliers and everything in the production system, you will per definition know who's actually producing your product. You know, who is that woman or man, where do they live, how much are they getting paid. So in that way you have much more information. So you really have to get real transparency, you really have to put systems in place that on a continuous basis collect the kind of data that you think is going to help you decide whether you are dealing with a business that's treating people and the environment in the way that you want that to be. And that's really only through data collection. If you don't have the data on how people are being paid, where they're producing, what dyes they're using, then you won't have transparency. So it's definitely going to be a long process, and you don't create these kind of systems overnight, but we've embarked on doing it. And I think, you know, we can already measure certain things, and I think we'll continue to improve that. So really a marketplace that's supported by tools, technical tools, and a financing process. And what we are offering on the site is, what we are offering the buyer is discovery of many, many makers and vendors from all over the world that they could never find in one place. We are offering them the flexible payments, and we are offering them, you know, a level of customization for the businesses that allow that to happen. What we are offering you, the maker, if any of you are interested in getting on board, is access to many more buyers, you know, a lot of help with setting up a virtual showroom really on our website. And we don't decide your pricing, we don't decide how you do business, we just help you get online if you feel that you are ready for the market. And we really do, and we offer the advance payments for you, for buyers that don't pay in advance. We can make sure that you get paid in advance. And so we really see ourselves as a platform for the maker, for the vendor. And we spend most of our time concerned with how can we make this as easy as possible? How can we make the process of getting onto our platform really easy for people? Not everybody has a strong digital footprint. And with that, I mean, you know, great imagery, a great collection that's photographed. We can go in and help with these things. Not everybody understands so well how to price their things. We can give you a hand with that as well, although that is your decision. So really view us as an additional resource. If you don't have a wholesale presence, you can get that on our platform, and we really are there to promote you. Of course, the buyer is the number one stakeholder, but we do see ourselves as a platform for vendors and makers, and we have your interest at heart. So I kind of lost track of time, but but really we think that there is I've been working in the sector for about 17 years, and I have never quite felt the opportunity I'm seeing right now. And so I think, there is, our platform really tries to solve some of the problems Jess was saying, is to make the process more streamlined, educate both the buyer and the vendor a bit more on the process, and be that conduit in the middle that watches the transaction, making sure it's okay. If there are any issues, we step in and support. If there are non-issues, you just deal directly with the buyer on the website. And of course, the more precise the information you put on our platform is, the easier it is for the buyer. And I completely agree with Jess that I think buyers really want to know upfront. And maybe there are a small amount of buyers who don't want to know everything upfront, but you're going to lose them on the road anyway. And then you've spent all this time doing all kinds of product development that then you're not going to get paid for in some cases. And that's not worth your time. You need to know who your customers are right away, what you can offer them, so you don't waste your time and you can really focus on creating products and selling them. And making money for your business and everybody in your business. And I think we have to be really focused on that, because we are all very involved in this sector because of impact, and we want to see an impact. But what is impact? If people are not selling enough products to pay people and grow their businesses, there's no impact. Impact is, I don't have to say that to you. You're in this every day, but it's completely linked to our success in selling. So, how can we make this more streamlined? How can we, and if there are things you can't do, don't get dragged into, oh, maybe I'll try, we'll see how it goes, as Jess was saying. No, stay with what you're good at, make that very clear, make that a very transparent service, and then really promote that. And then the buyers that want that service will also connect with you, and it's going to be a much easier, less lengthy and profitable process for you. So that's really the future we really see a future where, handmade and small batch production, which is really everything that is non-mass produced. We see that as having a very, very a prominent role in retail going forward. And I think it's up to us in the handmade sector to make sure that we can fill that role, that we can serve our production and products up to the buyers in a way that they need. What does the retail sector and the modern retail buyer needs today, and how can we make sure that we can satisfy that service? That's the opportunity. So it also will require some changes on your part, really understanding what retail looks like. And that's where our platform is trying to fill some of that gap, making that clear to the maker. But I think though, if we can make those changes, I think there's an enormous benefit waiting for us at the other side. And that's really what we believe in. And that's why we've been able to raise money from investors who've never really done anything in the handmade sector before, who are not even really impact investors, but they are incredibly excited about this opportunity. And they look at businesses like yours and they say, oh my God, it's the future. How can we get them online? How can we get them to grow their business? How can we get them to connect to buyers in a bigger way? And I know Linnea has done this from, more than anybody for the last 20 years. So I'm delighted to be on this panel with her and Jess to be talking about this, because I couldn't agree more.
The time is now, for sure.
It's now.
Thank you, Hedvig. It was a wonderful presentation. Just tell us, because Powered by People is still in beta, but it is going to be launching soon. So this is like a pre-preview for all of you who are participating in this very groundbreaking platform. When do you anticipate Powered by People going live?
Yeah, so we go live on the 23rd of June, but it's a very, very soft launch. We just really wanted to get out there. Not all our systems are completed the way we wanted them, but we already have buyers shopping on the site, and we really wanted to get a lot of feedback early on so we can make sure that we built a platform that is completely suited to you as makers and vendors and the buyer. And so I can share with Linnea and the team, after this call, if any of you are interested, the first thing we do is we give you any maker that wants to get on, we give you a due diligence link where it's a small survey of 5 to 10 minutes where we just ask you some basic questions about your business to get to know your business better and to gauge how ready are you for something like this. And if we feel that you are, then we will help you get onto the platform, and we have a whole team that spends all their time doing that. So this link is the first step on the way. And I think, as COVID continues, because it does seem that this is not going to be over anytime soon entirely. I think numbers are going a little bit up in Europe again. So we really do need to plan for running our businesses for a little bit longer. And I think I would say that, I think for our products, of course, people want to touch them because they're beautiful and they're artistic and they're handmade. But I think buyers are getting more and more used to not being able to do that, and they're trusting imagery and specifications more and more. But that also means, and I think this is where the fundamental change has been in COVID. If you don't have a good digital footprint, you don't exist to buyers, actually. And it's a tall order for businesses sitting out in difficult places in Africa, for example, where you might not have a lot of accessibility. But that's where we want to support you. And we sometimes come across makers that have great skills, but they don't really have a great small collection that's well photographed. And so we help you do that, because even if buyers end up buying something else or doing something custom with you, they discover you through seeing a small sample of what you do that is well photographed in good light. That is, the minimum bar for operating in this COVID world. And so I think that's really, really, really important. So I'll share the link, and if any of you are interested, also I'll also share my email. Please feel free to get in touch, and we would love to talk to all of you and learn more about your businesses.
Thank you, Hedvig. So you put that in the chat for us, and we're going to just roll right into questions. And so one of the questions I have is directly for you, COVID, which is, what are the Hedvig, sorry, what are the size of the retailers you work with? And do you also work with investors? I think that question means investors for the producer side, not just, yeah.
So far, because we haven't launched yet, but our retail network just so far is about 3,000 retailers, and I would say that we have had contact with, and we have in our previous businesses sold handmade products to before, and because both me and my co-founder had businesses in the handmade sector prior to this endeavor, and it's about 20% large retailers, so Nordstrom, Anthropologie, Williams Sonoma. We're doing also a collaboration with West Elm right now. So 20% of those, 20% museum shops, which are really good for handmade producers. My biggest client in my previous business was the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and they were a great buyer. And then about 60% independent retailers, and they could really be of any sizes. I would say my orders were ranging from the independent retailers, anything from 800 to 5,000-6,000 on average, I would say. And in terms of investors, we have mostly focused on raising money for our business, but we are also very much trying to create a network, and we are working with a couple of partners who have that network of investors who could invest in businesses that are doing well. And we actually do have investors asking us, can you tell us when you know who's doing better on your platform? Who are those businesses? What are they looking like? What do they need? So obviously having you on our platform and seeing how well you do would help us better help you also if you needed any kind of financing or investment or other kind of support. I actually think there's a lot of people who are looking to support the handmade sector, but believe it or not, and it seems strange to us who are all involved, but sometimes I think it's very hard for people to get into the sector and understand what is it really that I need to do here. And I would say, and I would put that back to you, I have to say many makers or vendors, I'm not so sure they always know what they need. And it can be hard to know exactly what you need. You want to grow your business, but exactly what is it you need to invest in to make that happen? I mean, that's obviously an ongoing question for any business, so it's not just for you. But I think, obviously having capital to grow your business is always very important, but capital alone will not grow a business. Do you have the right people in your team? Do you have the right kind of raw material suppliers for you if you have bigger orders? I mean, what are those kind of systems looking like for you is equally important, and lots of other things. So really trying to understand. Also, we did a project with the MasterCard Foundation last year, and hope we'll be working with them again. And, they are the third biggest foundation in the world, billions of dollars just for Africa, which is a unique opportunity for our sector. We wrote a report with them that really outlined, that I will also share in the chat, just how important your sector is, if, as a business opportunity, as an impact opportunity to reach sustainable development goals. And so they're beginning to understand that. But one thing that really struck me, we had made sort of a small dashboard where we were going to get basic sales and finance records for 60 businesses. We were going to upload them and then show the business a dashboard, and how easy it would be to follow your business if you had a dashboard. And a dashboard really just means having some of your core information about yourselves, your top customers, your top your top sellers, your revenues over the last year, what months were best, your returns, just basic business information. 10 businesses could give us records on anything related to their financing. And that said, and I think they really wanted to give us it, but it said to me that many businesses are not following money in and out. I mean, you don't have to have a big accounting system, QuickBooks or anything like that. As an Excel sheet, if you're a small business, showing, keeping track of money in and money out, because anybody who will give you any kind of investment, whether it's financing or equity investment, will need to see money in and out. So I found a little bit after that I was wondering whether some of the lack of investment in our sector is because we are not giving investors financial the kind of financial records that they need to make the assessment. And they won't change the way they assess businesses. We have to change that. And that's also a little bit what we're trying to do with our digital tools, to create structures where people can easily put in their financial and sales and production information, so you can keep a track of your business, see how many returns compared to last year, how many, this and that compared to last year, that we have to get into the habit of thinking like that. And it can be very gradual. We don't have to make big changes tomorrow. But I think that is part of professionalizing our sector, and that is where the opportunity for us lies.
Yeah, excellent. And so we have another question that I think piggybacks right onto that, which is, how can I prepare my business to be ready for export to the US? So one very, this example of having financial due diligence, and what other advice would you both give to someone who is preparing their business to export to the US? I think you've given a lot already, but if there's anything else you'd like to share.
Yes, I feel like I've been talking a lot, so maybe.
Yeah, I think it ties into what Hedvig was just saying about understanding your costs. I think that's a big one. It takes a lot to export. There's a lot of regulations involved, especially if you're going to benefit from AGOA, which is it's sad that it's such an underutilized tool. But I think taking the time to understand the rules, the requirements, we spend a lot of our time, and it's such a simple thing to get right. And it's the most commonly thing that's messed up is the paperwork. What you need to provide on a commercial invoice for understand how customs works to export out of your country, and how customs works in the country you're importing to. Because it can be one of your biggest financial screw ups is not providing the right documentation, and before you know it, you have taxes and VAT and things like that you weren't planning on. And so I think the biggest thing is understanding your costs and understanding your time. And I think the same way that Hedvig is saying, like, a lot of people can't provide financial documentation for their business. I think a lot of people can't account for their time as well. People don't know how much effort they're putting into it and what they're getting out in return, which trickles down into the practical of what you truly need for a minimum requirement, what you truly need for a lead time. So I think that just kind of that prior planning is the biggest step that catches up with people in the end, if they didn't take the time in the beginning. And we see it from the sample stage with things being delayed by a week, 02, 03, then it goes into production. And if you do that enough, you really start to damage your relationship with your client. And so I think understanding that from the get-go will put you on a really, really good path, because you'll have the answers to the questions that people are asking, and you'll know what you need.
Great. Yeah, excellent advice. And there's another question that dovetails into that. Is there a list available of products that get preferential rate under AGOA? Yes. And the best resource for that is the Trade Hub, that has resources on their website plus on agoa.info. That information is widely available to you by HS code, so you can be sure that your products are covered under duty-free status under AGOA.
I have actually a question on that. Are there people at the Trade Hub that can help people review their product and get the right HS code?
Yes. I think so. I mean, I'm speaking for them, but I think that's part of the mandate. Sim, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you so much, colleagues. I really want to, yes, get involved with that. So we've got, we actually virtually in every country, 8 countries that we work in, and we've got our resources within that, in the offices in those countries that can actually help with that when we have challenges. We pretty much, that's part and parcel of our job and a daily job. So we pretty much welcome anybody who wants to know more.
Excellent.
Yeah. That's something I'd recommend anybody that's looking at investing or exporting to the US do. I would say that, like, I would do that. If it were my business, I would take my collection, and the first thing I would do is set up a meeting with somebody you know at the trade hub and get the right classification, because you can do all the paperwork. And if US Customs, because the thing is, and I've run into this before, US Customs can disagree with how you've classified your product. We've done it before where we were exporting hand-woven garments from Ethiopia to the US, and we were putting it under, I think, just women's apparel, and they excluded it, and the right kind of classification was under this handicraft sector, and we ended up having to pay the duty on 2 or 3 massive shipments because US Customs rejected how we classified it. And it's a really difficult process to counteract with them. So if you have the classification, you have the documentation that you've worked on this with, you know, the USAID hub, and they're the ones that really kind of hold the power and the knowledge around AGOA, you'll have a much more powerful tool to work with customs on that.
Great. I saw something in the chat. Who is the best person at the hub to get in contact with for that information? Maybe if we can put an email, some emails in the chats by country, would that work?
That will certainly work, Linnea. We'll actually share all the details at the end of the webinar when we're closing out.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah, I was thinking because I think the chat you don't have access to after the call, right? And so maybe if there could be a follow-up email with all these links sort of from the trade hub and from Jess and me, and just in one email would be incredibly useful to everybody, I think.
Excellent. I think we just we can take maybe a few more questions. We've done a lot of exporting to the US through trade shows, but those have not been accessible due to COVID. What are the best avenues to the US for the next while? I think we've shared some of the technology-based trade show platforms and the B2B platforms that are coming sector specific in addition to trade fair, which is more general. Do you have other suggestions, Jess or Hedvig, for other ways to access if you're not traveling to trade shows?
To get in front of buyers if you're not going to trade shows? Yeah. I know that New York Now, we have a partnership with New York Now, so we're going there sort of with our platform, and we're also going to the Dallas show just to kind of speak to as many buyers in person. Obviously we are an online platform, but it's just a great place to talk to a lot of buyers about where their heads are at and what they're thinking. I know New York Now has an online version. I know that it has, people have had a lot of different opinions about to what extent that was useful. I didn't try that myself. And I assume that's why they made the partnership with us, because they knew it wasn't quite what it's supposed to be. But of course, it's much less expensive. I know that Trade and Impact, the association Trade and Impact that's set up by, Kathleen Holland, Stacey Edgar, probably a lot of you know her, and Daniela. They are having a future summit, handmade future summit in September. They did that last year. I thought it was really good, where they had a day of workshops. It was 2 days yesterday, it's being 1 day today, and then it had a trade show component. And Williams-Sonoma is sort of their main sponsor, but I know they're also inviting a lot of other people on, a lot of other buyers on this year. And I know it's specifically for Africa. So that's one I would really recommend. I think it would be really great for, I don't know all of your businesses so well, but I think it's exactly for people for businesses like yours. So I would recommend that. It is, I don't remember the date, but I can find out. It's I believe it's mid-September.
Great.
Yeah, and I would kind of add on to that, where it's, I think we saw, I mean, I worked a lot on various digital trade shows at the beginning and middle of last year. And it definitely has a mixed result, because the thing is about that people really saw once it got taken away is that that human and that face-to-face connection that the in-person trade shows provided was so much more valuable than we thought in establishing relationships and establishing trust. And kind of getting new work relationships off on a good footing. And I think that's one thing that people were surprised by with when we put it all on a digital platform, is that at the beginning, I think people thought, oh, this is going to be so much easier. Like, we can just put it on. People can, you know, it's pitched as like, you can go on whenever it's convenient for you. We're going to have it running for a few months, which is going to give people more time. But it didn't really turn out that way that I think people planned, because it's an easily forgotten thing. It's just on a web page, and you can start looking on it and get distracted, and then all of a sudden you just forget to ever go back. And so I felt like the people that were successful in utilizing those platforms used it almost as like a directory. They're like, okay, here's everybody that through this online trade show that I'm participating in, through this platform, or whichever way whichever one you've picked you think works for you, people that were successful took that and then added a lot of personal effort and communication and kind of a personal touch to how they're reaching out to buyers. Because I think people thought people were going to come to them, but it actually took a great deal more effort, because it's basically you're turning around and cold calling everybody. You know, the system basically just allowed you a place to put up photos. And so if those were great, then I think people were interested, but it took a lot more effort to transform that into a potential new buyer than I think people realized. And I think the people that did it well, I mean, were dedicating, you know, days and days of follow-up and photos and requesting calls and really being aggressive about it. Because it was a lot harder than I think anybody really thought it was going to be to connect virtually for the first time. We saw a lot of people just kind of fell back on vendors or relationships that they had knew prior. It was hard to create new relationships from just a digital format without having any sort of history or contact with them.
No, I think that's actually, you know, we spent the last 2 months onboarding, you know, artisan businesses to our platform, and we have about 60 on board now. We have about 100 signed up, but actually also just the onboarding process itself has been so much more time consuming that I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it's just that people don't have their images and their information in an organized way. And I don't blame anybody. There's so much going on, and running a business on daily business is incredibly hard work, and the day is never done, and it's hard to get these structural things organized. And you know, so that's why I think that getting onto a platform, ours or any other, you know, you are forcing yourself to do a lot of the preparation when you're onboarding, because there are these, you know, it's hard to get on, and we do get a lot of, I wouldn't say complaints, but people saying, oh, it's too complicated, it's too time consuming. And I would say yes, and we are trying to make this easier for you. On the other hand, there's also some work to be done on your side. You know, this is a way to help you streamline your business better. And so I think, you know, there's a little bit on both sides. But I think it's great practice, because that's exactly what the buyers want to see. They want to see certain imagery, they want to have certain product information. And if that can just be there in the first conversation, that saves a lot of energy and a lot of email chains back and forth with additional information and new images and impact information. And I think we've all tried these, I don't know, long email chains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We are running out of time. And so there are a few more questions that we will certainly get to after, and write to you or write to the hub and get information out to everyone. What I would say is, there was one question that I'm just going to use in my wrap up, which is how does how does this webinar help us succeed in the US market and what are its benefits? I think that there are multiple components that we're talking about for US market entry here, everything from logistics, shipments, cost, paperwork, AGOA, through to quality, transparency of your supply chain and presentation of your brand. So that's not a small undertaking for anyone, but that is what it does take to attract and work in the US market. I also think that part of what the hub is doing in the relationship with Bhavana is we are also working at business matchmaking for Southern Africa companies. And so we are looking at all of the benchmarks that have been talked about, and are actively working to match companies with buyers as well, particularly in this COVID situation. So I'm sorry that we're out of time. What I'd like to just say is I want to just thank our guest presenters, Jess and Hedvig, for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us today. Much of the information that I shared is being about market trends and supply chain management is being included in an e-booklet that the Trade Hub will have available soon. So this reference guide can help you to navigate exporting to the US market or to US or international markets. So look for that to come as another, as a way of supporting you in reaching US markets. And I just want to wish each of you the very best in your business and the very best on your personal journey as well. And thank you for joining us today. And Sam, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Lene, and the two experts that actually joined us today. My job is actually the easier one to close out our very great webinar. But before I do that, I just want to touch maybe on a few questions that were raised about eligibility of products under AGOA. Just to say that there's close to 6,500 product lines that are actually eligible to get into the US. So clearly, there is a need to have a conversation with experts if we're not aware of our HS code so that we can actually help you on that. And the other question that was partly answered as well by our colleagues was, how does one know they're export ready? I'll be sharing contact details of my colleagues in the region that you can actually reach out to under USAI Trade Hub. Then we can actually assist you and also help you towards being export ready and accessing the markets that we've been speaking to. So I just thought I'd get into that quickly. And then SPay, we've done a lot of webinars on a lot of topics. And if you really need to know more about what we've done, please go onto our website. You'll actually be able to access videos and presentations from previous webinars. That would be very, very useful. And then we also, as we said, there's actually various partners, our not partners, but our staff, our members of staff who are actually working in the region. Don't know if we can share the contact details right now before I talk to upcoming events. So we've got, please you can just get me to this. Thank you very much. So this is a list of our country reps in the different countries that we work in. Please feel free to reach out to them on all issues pertaining to what we're talking about here and accessing the US market. The colleagues are actually ready to actually help with whatever help you need. And then from here, I can maybe go on to our upcoming events that we are hosting pretty soon. Please just move on to the cat. So as per our slide there, we've got the Mozambique Exporter Awards ceremony. We do reward performers, people that actually try to access our markets of choice based on our objectives. We also have another function in Zambia and Swatini as well. And then we have a webinar that's most probably not going to apply to some of us here because we are in a different space. But this is for the Food Safety Management webinar, which will be on the 30th of June. And then we're also having other exporter awards in Botswana, just again to reward companies that are actually exporting and improving their business systems. Next slide. Okay, we've just done the contact details of people and that you can get a hold of, which is good. So from my side, really, I'd really want to thank everybody, all the 90 people that are here who attended the webinar, and we hope that it's been useful to you. Please feel free to reach out to us for whatever questions that you want answered, and we shall clearly answer. And a special thanks to the two buyers from the US. I'm so happy that they're actually willing to share their contact details, which is very rare. So you're all ready and able to actually contact them and make sure that you use up all the opportunities that are available to us. And this is our key objective. And we're happy to actually be of use to you so that you can expand your business to the US. So with that said, I would like to thank you all, and we close out, and pretty much want to see you soon and deal with you so that we can actually have our experts going. Have a good day. Thank you.